Hello, everybody! Welcome to the ninth episode of the Warped Eye podcast.
I'm Coffee.
And I'm Macaron. Today's episode, we'll be starting off with Productivity Corner for the first time ever. Our segment topics today are the productivity app Notion and Alan Turing, one of my favorite role models in history. I think his accomplishments were pretty awesome.
Yes, so look forward to the Alan Turing segment. But first off, we'll be starting with what is Notion? So, Notion is an increasingly popular productivity app. If you've been on StudyTube, you know what we're talking about. But we're still here to tell you about what we're talking about. But it's a productivity app that you can download on your computer or on your phone. You can get it for free for the individual plan. You can also do it for teams, like you can collaborate on it, but you have to pay for that. And we're high schoolers and we don't have money to pay for that. So we'll mostly be talking about the individual plan of Notion because that's what we have experience with. So what do we use Notion for? What do you use Notion for, Macaron?
I use Notion for a lot of things. So I think the majority of things that I use it for are probably note taking and making active recall for just anything like Science Olympiad, Campbell biology textbook, on all of that. And then I also use it, I am actually planning to use it going into high school to arrange tasks like assignments, due dates, and a digital view of all of the important tests that are coming up and quizzes and homework assignments, plus events that I might need to attend, and then organizing to-do lists, like weekly to-do lists, which are very, very helpful in the school year to arrange all of your things. I used it a lot last year. And then also planning, goal setting, managing projects like this podcast is managed on Notion, and even more. And I also use it, I've made kind of a dashboard of my life, including a digital journal, a bucket list that I might have. Yeah, I think a lot of people who love digital, everything being digital and on your laptop for easy access, I think Notion would be great for that type of person. It's you can have everything that you need in your life arranged in one dashboard or in multiple pages. So what are some benefits of Notion?
Notion has something for everybody or everything. It's very user-friendly and highly aesthetic and clutter-free. If you want to go check out the interface or watch some tutorials on YouTube of it, or just go to the
Watch that Study Nerds tutorial. It's very good.
Yes, watch Macaron's tutorial of Notion. But I think the reason that I really like it, not the reason, not the main reason, but one of the main reasons I just like it because it's very customizable and versatile. Like Macaron said before, you can use it for a lot of different things. It's a very all-purpose app. Like it has a lot of different templates. There's also lots of page views. You can organize your page in many different ways. So whatever suits you, it's most likely there. There's also dark mode, if that's your thing.
Yes. I think some of the benefits of Notion include just being able to have get your life together. That's one of the main reasons why people like having everything digital. I mean, it's your personal preference, but I think for people who do like everything digital, the main thing that appeals to them is the fact that everything can be in one place. And when you do have so many apps for so many different things, like using one to-do list app, and then another app for your journal, and then another app for your flashcards, and then another app for your notes, it's very cluttered sometimes. Your digital life can be very cluttered. And Notion just helps all of that be in one place. You can embed Spotify playlists in there and just not have to open Spotify and get distracted by figuring out which songs to add to your next playlist.
There,
So we talked a lot about the benefits of Notion, but there are some disadvantages. So the main one for me is that I find it very hard to connect with things that are digital because some people really like it. As I said, you like it for the benefits that we just mentioned, right? But some disadvantages are that having everything digital does not give some people a satisfaction of having everything physical, and it also depends on your life situation, right? Because taking notes on Notion may not be as easy for some people. Because in high school, I don't think all my teachers are going to let me have my computer out because they might be sus of why I have my computer out during like a lecture or something. Not a lecture, but like, like a teaching lesson or whatever. And so I will probably have to use a paper notebook. And I personally love the satisfaction of paper notebooks. Some people aren't particularly a fan of it or don't really have a preference, but I do. So it depends on the person. So it can be a disadvantage for some people. And then it can also get very, very confusing when you first use it. And there is only a certain amount of customizing that you can do, and making it really pretty is actually as time consuming and frustrating as maybe having a real journal is, especially depending on the person. If you're not that great with tech and just figuring out apps that well and you do not want to spend that much time on it, it might not be the best thing for you. But there are obviously templates that people have made online that they just put out there for free that you can just copy and paste, which you can do. But obviously, you might not like the templates that people have already posted, and you'd probably don't want to spend the time. You may have impeccable handwriting and just love just doing bullet journaling or having it in physical notebooks. But yeah, that those are some disadvantages, and these disadvantages are highly personality and like person based. It depends person to person. The benefits that we've just described might be disadvantages to some people, and the disadvantages might be benefits to other people. So you don't know. It depends on you.
yeah, that is a very good point. If you want to try out Notion or any, that was a good point. And I think another disadvantage that's less personality based is that even though you can use Notion on your phone and on your computer, I have like the phone app, but I don't. My phone screen is so tiny, and like Notion, the way the pages are like designed, it covers so much space, and it just really doesn't work well with like the dimensions of a phone screen. So I don't think the mobile app is really all that useful, and also it doesn't really have as much functionality in like formatting pictures or fonts like you would get with like a Word document or a Google Doc. Like you can't really resize pictures or like annotate them. You can resize pictures, but they always like have you place the picture like right in the center, and like you can't like move, and it annoys me so much. But it's just that one tiny disadvantage. But like obviously this might not be for you if you don't like digital stuff and like it gets too time consuming or too frustrating to organize everything, because I know when you get a lot of pages, like right now I have a lot of pages and I have multiple like workspaces, it gets very confusing and difficult to remember where everything is and remembering to like check stuff. Weigh the costs and benefits for yourself. But altogether, I think it's one of the better productivity apps out there. Very
Yeah,
aesthetic.
definitely.
I
And I
cannot say that enough.
think yeah, and the thing with Notion is that even if you don't like using it for some things, you can definitely like for some things you can definitely use it for other things. In this school year, I used Notion for to-do lists and notes because it was in an online environment and it was convenient for me. But maybe when I'm going back to school, I'll mainly use Notion for organizing other things. You
Yeah,
can
I think
personalize it.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think that's another benefit of Notion. Like, it gives you a lot of control over how you want to use it. Like, it's not really like pre-made paper planners where they have like the whole template laid out for you, and like you gotta put like your to-do list here, and there's like no space for your long-term goals. But like with Notion, you it gives you a lot of freedom and choice.
Yeah. Well, I hope that was a great Notion promotion. Well, JK, we're not sponsored, but anyways, let us move on to the History of Science segment and discuss Mr. Alan Turing, featuring disproving some content in the movie The Imitation Game, which was based on his life and mainly his journey in solving the Enigma code, which we will get to in a moment. But first, let us start out with Alan Turing's young life. He was born on June 23rd, 1912, in London, and he had quite an interesting childhood. So, from an early age, he was very interested in mathematics, and he was a very bright kid, way smarter than anyone his age. And because of that, it was 1912s, 1910s, you know. He was ridiculed in school, he was bullied a lot. He went to a top private school because he was so smart and his parents were well off, so he was quite ridiculed and like bullied in school. And the movie shows this. Like the bullies at school took the floorboards out of his school, put him under it, and nailed the floorboards shut on top of him. And unlike the movie, some one of his friends did not come and get him out. One of the teachers came and got him out. But yeah, it was very, very traumatic for him. And on that topic, the friend that the movie showed that got him out, he was a childhood crush of Alan Turing in his teenage years. So Alan Turing from his teenage years knew that he was gay early on, and this plays a part later in his life. And that was another reason he was bullied in school a lot, but he was obviously not publicly out yet. But yeah. And then moving on to his later education, Alan Turing studied mathematics at the University of Cambridge and was elected into a fellowship at King's College. And I don't know exactly when, but he also studied at Princeton for a time. And in Princeton, he studied under a professor who had an interest in cryptography, and that is where Alan Turing's interest in cryptography grew. And so now he has, through all of these professional education, he has now an interest in a lot of different STEM subjects, everything from math to cryptography to philosophy to biology to computers and to everything. So he has a very wide range of likes and dislikes now.
Yes, and a wide range of influence. So I think
Yes.
his most famous, arguably, contribution is probably the Turing machine, which he proposed in a paper in 1936. So basically, what was the Turing machine? Well, to put it simply, it was an abstract model of a computer. It basically encapsulated the fundamental logical principles of the modern digital computer, and it's considered one of the foundational models of computability and theoretical computer science. But like the machine was not created to for computer science. It was created to compute real numbers and disprove this challenge that some other scientists had proposed called the decision problem, and it has another name. I don't know how to say it. Background, do you want to say
Yes.
it?
And Scheidung's problem. I mean, that's according to YouTube. I think it's probably Scheidung's problem because there's only one I. Why would it be Scheidung's problem? But that's what it says, but we shall refer to it as the decision problem. Much easier to
Yeah,
say, and it's English, so that's nice.
Yeah, so this decision problem stated that there is an algorithm that can tell if a proposition is provable if this algorithm is given all the axioms of math. And Turing, along with another scientist, I believe, or maybe he was a mathematician. Should I group mathematicians with scientists? But anyways,
I mean, they're both in the STEM field, so I guess so.
they are all researchers. Okay, but like he used this Turing machine to prove that this decision problem was unsolvable. There's no algorithm that can tell if a given proposition is provable or like true. And we won't be going into the details of how this works. I'm pretty sure there are lots of videos or like articles out there on the internet explaining this. So that was his first major contribution, and then his second in chronological order. We're going to the 1940s during wartime, where he joined the government code and cipher school in 1938 to work on some code breaking machines when a war with Germany started. So, Macaron, would you like to explain this part of his life?
Yes. So, I find this part very interesting because I think a lot of things that happened in World War II were quite interesting. So, we shall get into the science that was taking place now. So, yeah, Turing joined the government of Code and Cipher School in 1938 and moved to the wartime headquarters at Bletchley Park in a place in the UK called Buckinghamshire. Buckinghamshire when war with Germany started, and his work at Bletchley Park is very oddly depicted in the movie. He didn't they The type of work he was doing and the way he was behaving at Bletchley Park was quite different. So in interviews with Alan Turing's colleagues from Bletchley Park and from his future accomplishments and endeavors in life, you can see people referring to him as someone who was very approachable, someone who had a keen sense of humor, someone who who people were, quote, very fond of. And this was not at all what the movie showed. The movie made it seem like Alan Turing was possibly on the autistic spectrum. He had very interesting quirks, like he had to separate the carrots and the peas in his salad. He only liked sandwiches. He seemed very cold. Couldn't understand jokes and sarcasm, but that's not at all what he was in real life. We have no idea if he liked sandwiches that much or if he really did separate his carrots and his peas, but he was definitely not a cold person in real life. Yeah, and his work at Bletchley Park in the movies was shown like that people didn't really like the work and they that he had a lot of trouble trying to get funding. And of course, yeah, there was always some troubles because it is science and finding money is always a bit hard, especially in wartime. But it wasn't nearly as hard as the movies showed it to be because people actually did find his work very interesting and wanted him to continue, even though it did take a little while for it to happen. So yes, let us move on to Enigma. So Enigma is like the word used for the principal cipher machine used by the German military to encrypt radio communications during war. And so this was very hard to figure out. But in 1932, before the war started, of course, a small team of Polish mathematician cryptanalysts, that's how you say that. I knew that. Cryptanalysts created the code breaking machine Bomba, which is Polish for a type of ice cream, which cracked codes using Enigma. But the thing is, in 1940, when the war was going on, Bomba was rendered useless by the Germans as the Germans changed the procedures used in Enigma. And Bomba had relied on the procedures of Enigma for decoding. So, in that same year, Alan Turing, along with others, created Bomb, which replaced Bomba to help supply the Allies with large amounts of military intelligence. And in the movie The Imitation Game, you can see them like working away every day trying to decode every message that came through. And there were so many possibilities as to what each code could mean, right? Imagine every day trying to decode a new message, a new code every single day. That was basically rendered impossible. And so Alan Turing, along with others, he tried to make Enigma, basically. He was working on Enigma throughout this entire thing. And again, in the movies, it was shown that that people didn't support this decision as much because they thought he should be working on actually decoding by hand, which is what everyone else was doing basically. And the characters in this whole process on the team were fictional in the movie. Some of them were just made up by the writers. And also in the movie, they show that only a few people were really helpful in the process of making Enigma. That actually they hired an entire team to help him because it was his idea. It was just mainly he needed assistance and stuff, obviously, because it was a very big task to take on. But yeah, eventually he made Enigma, which was the cipher machine, and it eventually was able to encrypt radio communications, and he was able to help to supply the Allies with a lot of military intelligence, which was groundbreaking and really, really, really helped people. Yes.
Yeah, about like people appreciating his work. I think like it was actually quite appreciated. I think he was
Mhm.
actually awarded something by the British government for being an outstanding officer in the war or whatever. So
Exactly, and they did not show that in the movie. It was shown as like, oh, while he was doing his work, people were like very cold to him. That was not true at all.
this is just turning into a movie review. But
Sorry.
back to the facts. So after the war was over, in 1945, he was recruited to the National Physical Laboratory, or the NPL, in London to create an electronic computer. How exciting! So basically, he created a design for the ACE or ACE or whatever, and this stands for Automatic Computing Engine. And his design was the first complete specification of an electronic stored program all-purpose digital computer. So fancy, but like basically what modern computers are like, it's all purpose, it's digital, you can use it for like many different purposes. And stored program just means that the program instructions are stored in a memory in the computer instead of plugging something in to get the instructions into the computer. But unfortunately, Turing's colleagues at the National Physical Laboratory thought that his ACE design would be too difficult to engineer, so they made a much smaller machine in 1950 called Pilot Model ACE. How cool! What a cool name! But but like if Turing's original machine was engineered, then it would have been much faster and it would have had significantly more memory than other early computers, so that's such a shame. He also contributed to the very beginning of the computer science and programming field by writing the very first programming manual, which was used in the first marketable electronic digital computer released in February 1951, and this computer was called Ferranti Mark One.
Now, moving on to about 1950s range. Now Turing is considered a founding father of artificial intelligence and modern cognitive science. Turing helped drive the hypothesis that the human brain is mostly a digital computing machine. He also proposed the Turing test in 1950 as a way to tell whether an artificial computer was thinking like a real human, like an actual human. Like there are possibilities now that we can make AI that can write books, like creative books, and actually act like human beings. But this Turing test will tell the difference, you know? So basically, this is what the Turing test is. It basically requires that the machine that we are referring to is able to execute all human behaviors regardless of whether they're actually intelligent beings or not. And it even tests for behaviors that aren't really considered quote unquote intelligent at all, such as the susceptibility to insults, the temptation to lie, or simply being or simply a high frequency of typing mistakes. Because
Wow,
if you're really, really a
typing.
computer, you won't make any typing mistakes. But if you do make some, that means you're human. So,
Yeah,
yes,
I think it's sort of playing at what separates life from like perfection, like being able to compute lots of things and not make mistakes, or like only make mistakes at a very low rate.
work. So, yeah, that is the Turing test. I don't know
Yeah,
what
I
else.
think this kind of leads into artificial life, which is different from artificial intelligence because artificial life is like creating life in a way that isn't natural, like taking a bunch of metal and being like, woo, now you have life. Well,
Oh
not
my
as fantastical as that, but like in 1952, Alan Turing published a paper called The Chemical Basis of Morphogenesis, which describes artificial life, and it claims that patterns and structure could arise from rather homogeneous systems due to the instability of the homogeneous equilibrium in the system. So, like, basically, if you just have like some random system, like he's saying, like, eventually somehow they're gonna arrange into some sort of organization, and then maybe this organization would be sufficient to create all the biological organization that sustains life. But unfortunately, in the same year, in 1952, some bad events happened in his personal life where he was convicted of gross indecency in March of 1952. And this crime was specifically convicting him of homosexuality because back in 1952 in Britain, this was actually a crime. So, like, being convicted of this, he was sentenced to a year of hormone therapy.
And like it's not even therapy, it's just they give him hormones basically to suppress his sexual needs. It's so weird to say, but that's basically what it is. It chemically produces hormones so your brain doesn't think of those acts and those things anymore. So that's the hormone quote unquote therapy that he was receiving. And there were many physical symptoms to this therapy too. Everything about him was like changing, like his physical appearance and even some parts of his personality, because obviously this is traumatic. Yeah, that was in 1952. And because he was convicted of a crime, that also meant that Turing, he could no longer work for the British government's post-war code-breaking center now that he had a criminal record, right? He can't work for the government anymore. But Turing eventually died in 1954, 16 days before his 42nd birthday. So he was only 41 years old when he died. And he died from cyanide poisoning. A housekeeper found him just lying on his couch with like a poisoned apple next to him. And his death was ruled as suicide, even though some evidence, it's noted that some evidence has been consistent with accidental poisoning, but that's very unlikely considering the type of work that he was doing at the time. It was not related to cyanide at all, and he was going through a lot mentally too because of the hormone, again, quote unquote, therapy that he was receiving. So obviously that was very
Yeah,
traumatic.
wow, that's
A sad
really
ending.
sad.
Well, yeah, I guess
His
that's all we
impact,
have now. So
yes, his impact can still be felt today. Everything to do with your computer.
thank Alan Turing.
We've come to the end of the episode. It's taking a while to get used to this short 2 segment episode format, but we hope that it's easier for you to listen to. But that's all for today, so have a good life.